everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of International Reality. We really hope you enjoyed episode 1, which covered the first ever episode of 90 Day Fiancé UK. I'm really excited to watch episode 2 next week and recap that for you. We'll continue to cover the series. Today we're actually going to kick off the latest season of another international reality show, Married at First Sight Australia. I was shocked to hear that MAFS Australia had been taken off of Lifetime TV. It's still available on the streaming app. This might be a big call, but in my opinion, MAFS Australia is the best Married at First Sight franchise available. While I understand the criticisms of the show, and I have them too, I think it's just such a great watch. If this is your first season watching MAFS Australia or recapping it with me, welcome. If you have seen prior seasons, you know what I'm talking about. It's a little bit different from the other franchises. Season 9 opens to an announcement that Sydney, Australia has gone into a lockdown due to COVID. And we can tell straight away that this is going to be an interesting season that's going to have some different dynamics than we're used to. All of the cast are introduced one by one and each speak about how much they love, very Darcy and Stacey style. We even hear an American accent in the picture as well with one of the castmates. There's absolutely gorgeous scenery, as we would expect in Australia, and I'm looking forward to seeing, some of the wedding venues and places that they go on the honeymoons. We're then introduced to the experts. There are 3 of them. The first is Mel Schilling. She is a relationship and dating coach. We have Alessandra Rampolla, a clinical sexologist, and John Aiken, a relationship expert. I have seen John Aiken on various relationship shows over the years, and he's come to find a home on Married at First Sight Australia, so I look forward to seeing what he does in this show. Straight away, they flash to the experts telling some hard truths to the castmates and telling them that if they want to be in a relationship, they need to suck it up. We also see flash forwards to a lot of yelling between the couples, some what appear to be shocking scenes with castmates with their jaws dropped, and even people seeming to walk off set in the middle of some of the stay or leave ceremonies, which I'll describe shortly. We see couples in moments of intimacy, partying, and of course the wedding ceremonies themselves. So it looks like it's going to be an action-packed season. There are a few key differences about the Australian version of MAFS that are important to note. So the couples do get together on a weekly basis for a dinner party. This can lead to some explosive interactions because while the show is about the relationships between the couples, inevitably there's tension between the various couples who are the castmates, as well to think that in some other versions, especially earlier versions of MAFS, that couples didn't really interact throughout the show, except maybe right at the beginning, right at the end. Here, it's very much integrated into the seasons, and it's a big part of the MAFS Australia story. Once a week, the couples also get together with the experts. They each sit on a couch one by one, where the experts ask tough questions, and ultimately each person needs to write on a card and share with the group whether they ultimately want to stay or leave the relationship. If we get into a situation where one part of the couple says they want to stay and the other says that they want to leave, both parts of the couple, so the full couple, I guess, need to stay for the full entire week, which, as you can imagine, can be very interesting. It would have been very interesting in the latest season of MAFS United States to see what happened with one of the couples that left during their honeymoon. We're on to meeting the couples, and we kick off with Jackson. Jackson is 31 years old, and he's a plumber. He describes how he grew up with a single mum and sisters, and from the very outset of this episode, he gets really vulnerable. He talks about volatile situations he experienced growing up with various stepdads and how he used to protect his stepsisters and, turn the volume up so that they couldn't hear what was going on outside. He gets quite teary with the producers, and there's this weird moment where it's kind of obvious why he's upset telling this horrible story. And the producers ask, "Why does it make you emotional, Jackson?" Of course, he says it's because it's his sisters, and he'd never want his sisters to be in a bad situation. Jackson also shares that he believes women should be treated with respect, that he's looking for a lifelong partner, and he wants to treat his future partner how he'd want someone to treat his sisters or his mum. So it sounds like Jackson's going to be a nice guy in this season. We then get to meet the first bride, Domenica. She's 28 years old. She's a makeup artist from New South Wales, And she says that she's slightly shitting herself, in her words, because she's getting married to a stranger. They show her Zooming with her parents, and she's embarrassed because they have Windex in the background of her Zoom. And despite her pleas, her father refuses to change for anybody, and the Windex stays in place. Domenica shares that she's Italian and that she's seeking to emulate her parents' relationship. When she shares with her dad that she's marrying an absolute stranger, he asks to leave the room for 5 minutes, and you hear him drop an F-bomb loudly in the background. She shares that she was with her ex-husband for 4 years in a relationship, but that they were married for only 2 months. She mentions that this is considered a really big deal in Italian culture and that she's actually lost long-term relationships and was judged for that, but she's ready to fall in love now and it's all she wants. So Domenica, having been married beforehand, is clearly going to be a plot point this season. And her parents and she are going to be characters. I think that this is going to be the couple where we potentially see the most swear words. That said, we have only met 2 people so far. And to point out that Domenica is not being paired with Jackson, they're kind of introducing them in a little bit of a random order at the moment. The second bride we get to meet is Selena. She's a 33-year-old hairdresser from South Australia. And she straight away shares some pictures of when she was younger and how she remembers feeling picked on at school, that she felt invisible and by herself. She attributes this to the fact that she is part Chinese and that her parents were born in Cambodia, and that they showed her love through shelter, education, and food. When she shared that she wanted to drop out of school and become a hairdresser, they were not happy or supportive, and so she felt like a disappointment. They then introduce us to her parents. They sit down for a cup of tea together. Selena talks to them about how arranged marriage is normal in their culture, really trying to warm them up for the news she's about to drop, and then shares that she's getting married and that's been arranged by experts. Her parents both look pretty shocked and confused, and her mother takes a big gulp of air, and when Selena asks if she has their approval, the dad says, actually, you don't 100% have our approval. And that the difference here is that her parents knew each other when their marriage was arranged, but that Selena's going to be married a complete stranger. Selena's impression from things that her mother has said to her before is that she just wants Selena to marry a rich man, and that's how she's going to prove to her mum that she's really made it in life. Now it's time to meet Andrew. He's 39 years old. He's a motivational speaker. He says he's from the Deep South, which turns out to be Dallas, Texas, and that he's been living in Australia, New South Wales specifically, for the last 5 years. He shares that he's been married twice previously and has learned a lot from those experiences. He's been struggling to find a longer-term relationship, but he believes that life is meant to be experienced with someone else, and this experiment is how he's going to try and get through that. We meet Brent. He's 33. He's a hospitality manager from New South Wales. He shares that he had a big, successful business for 7 years, that he lost himself and his personal life suffered. He didn't have anyone to share his success with. Then we get into a scene where he shares that he likes to be both the big and the little spoon when it comes to cuddling. Al, or Alan as he calls himself, is 25. He's a carpenter from New South Wales. The first shot we see of Al is him coming out of the ocean in his swim shorts and kind of a Baywatch jog, saying that everybody loves him. He does finger guns, which gives you a sense of the type of guy he is. Says that he loves to party, says that he's half Malaysian and half Australian, which is why the ladies love him. Shares that if he could give himself a rating out of 10, he'd give himself an 11. And when production asks him if he has any insecurities, he says probably his legs and that they're not as muscly as he wants them to be, and then asks if that's a good answer. So Al is clearly one of the younger castmates on the show and may have some maturity opportunities. We then meet our next bride. I guess in my notes I put her as Grumpy Lady. To be fair, her name is Holly. She's 36, and she shares that she'd never thought she'd be 36 without a husband and a baby. You see her in the car on her way to the Hens night, nervously kind of playing with her fingers. She's a cinema manager. She lives in New South Wales. And she shares that she's on a timeline and that she doesn't have the fertility of a 26-year-old. She says that being a wife and a mother is perhaps the most important thing to her. She wants it so bad and is willing to try anything, which I guess is why she's decided to marry a stranger at first sight. It sounds like her fertility and wanting to have a baby straight away is going to be a big plot point this season. We briefly meet Ella. She's 27 years old and she's a beautician from Victoria. We don't really get to know her this episode. She seems to have a really bubbly personality. That's all that we really get from her right now. We're then introduced to Anthony. Anthony is 38 years old. He does sales. He's from Victoria. He defines himself as someone who has a daughter and says that she's his ticket into heaven. His goal of being on this experiment is to find the love of his life. He describes himself as an old school romantic who holds the door open, who, pays for meals and so on. He wants to be a part of a team and a partnership and wants to find someone who's his ride or die, and that's the only thing that he says is missing in his life. We then flash to a man standing on a rock halfway up a cliff type deal, bathing. It looks like he's about to shoot a calendar of some description or something like that. Then he's strutting confidently through what appears to be an office building, but is apparently the hallway to the Bucks night venue, and that is Mitch. Again, we don't see a ton of Mitch this episode, but that's our first introduction. We're then introduced to Olivia. Olivia immediately shares that she has insecurities stemming from being overweight. She shares that at one point she was 95 kilograms and that she tried to be confident on the surface but was not underneath. Olivia's 28. She's a teaching student from New South Wales. She shares that she's allowed herself to be treated the way she has in the past because of her weight and how she felt about herself, and that her tendency in the past was to settle for what she thought she deserved. Olivia shares that she has had gastric sleeve surgery, which has given her confidence, but she's still never truly comfortable in what she wears, how she presents herself, or how she interacts with people, and that she really wants her husband to accept her the way that she is. By this time, we've got introduced to the individual parts of several of the couples, and the focus of this episode really, in addition to two of the weddings, is the Buck night and the Hens night. So that really is the bachelor party and the bachelorette party, as they're known in Australia. Jackson is the first to arrive at the Bucks party. He stands around with a beer waiting for the others to arrive. Andrew struts in second. He's looking very confident, introduces himself, followed by Cody and then Brent. It's funny because the four of them joke about, maybe there's a young guy, a baby of the group, and then in walks Al. Al immediately shares with the group as they're having a few beers that he's never been in a relationship before and that this will be his first girlfriend, his first wife, all of the first things. Anthony shares that he really wants to live in the moment. They all discuss how they want a cheesy smile and to be excited by someone when they see them walk down the aisle. And then we also meet Jack. So they're all socializing over a beer. Mitch walks in just after Al has shared that he's the best looking guy in the room. And Cody describes Mitch as an attractive guy with a strong look to him. Mitch shares that he wants a long-term thing and just hasn't found the right person. Interestingly, all the guys then start talking about how good-looking Mitch is. The camera keeps shooting to Al's face. Al does not join in that discussion. So the producer straight up asks him in an interview, who is the better-looking guy? And Al says he's for sure better-looking than Mitch. That seems to be Al's focus. It's really on aesthetics, again, going back to the maturity. Brent shares that he wants someone who recites movie quotes, so they're getting oddly specific about what they want in a partner. Now we're on to the Hens night. Domenica is the first to show up at the swanky venue. It's got a beautiful view. She paces nervously. She is concerned there's no bartender there yet and is waiting for her new friends. The second bride to arrive is Celine, who is wearing a lovely sparkly dress. Celine immediately asks Domenica, are you Italian? And she agrees that she is and shares a term that is quite broadly used in Australia that is probably offensive elsewhere, so I'm not going to say it here. Sam comes in and then Domenica describes her as the blonde girl with the long blonde hair. She also has trouble calling Celine Selena. This gets extra confusing when another castmate actually named Selena comes in. Domenica's going to have problems this season. But Selena does announce that everyone in the room is a really good catch, and they all joke about why are we here. Holly joins the group next and immediately announces to the group that she's 36 years old and wants to have a baby, so no mucking around there. Ella hasn't been in love in 9 years. Tamara joins the group. She wants someone mature. Celine shares with the group that she has a 2.5-year-old. And then Olivia joins. She shares that she felt insecure because she's wearing a skimpier dress than usual. She's sizing herself up against the other girls and decides that she was the biggest girl there. Overall, both groups seem to be getting along well at its initial stages, but the girls are very complimentary of each other and themselves as a group. The guys are just chatting around a beer in Aussie style and just seem very laid back and interested in the other people and way they're in the experiment. At this point, the experts randomly pop in to the Bucks and Hens night. So John goes to the Bucks night and Mel and Alessandra to the Hens night. It seems more like a general introduction where the experts confirm that they've found them partners and that they're going to go through an experience that will be challenging but worth it. Within like a minute of talking, they then say, have a great night, and they disappear, and the drinking continues. Dom asks the group, what do we not want in a guy? Olivia's answer is someone who's rude to wait staff. Tamara takes issues with this and says sometimes you need to say something if the food's not really good. Then they start getting into whether they'd be okay with a guy who was shy. Tamara straight up says she has masculine energy and that if a guy is too weak, she'll break him. She's already described by others in the group as sassy and a firecracker, and women in the group already appear to be concerned about who Tamara is paired with, given the forcefulness of her personality, and she seems to have really clear ideas about what she expects in a partner. The experts then share that it's been an unusual year because people haven't been dating due to the pandemic, and that a lot of people really need love and need someone with whom they can form a really strong relationship. We get a little insight at this point into how the couples matched people and why. Starting with Celine and Anthony, they're described as an older couple, which is, they're not that old, they're in their 30s, but they can bring experience into the experiment. Celine has invested her time into her child, and now it's really her turn to experience a relationship. It's been hard for her being a single mom. She shares that she was married and that her former partner betrayed her in the worst way possible and broke her heart. She found it difficult to walk away because her son was so young, but she wasn't happy, and so she did make the choice to leave. That she hasn't been dating since and hasn't really put herself out there because of the past. And it made her feel selfish to take that time away from her child. Celine is from a very close-knit Turkish family, and she actually lives with her parents. They speak fluent Turkish together. Celine says that they're loud. Sometimes people think that they're actually arguing when they're just being loud, but that sometimes they do fight, and that she's really proud of her culture. Family is really important to Celine, and she looks up to her grandparents' marriage, which was actually arranged. Her goal is to have a family again. She's open to having her own kids with the new husband. She's also open to someone who has kids already and thinks that she'd make a great stepmom. She talks about loving old school romance. If you remember, Anthony had also shared that he's an old school romantic. He'd said he'll pay when they're out for dinner, lead when they dance. Then we get a slow motion shot of Anthony in a cafe drinking a coffee. Anthony also talks about his child. He says that his daughter means the world to him and that she's on the spectrum, which in his words means that she sees the world in her own special way. There's a shot of him looking at some really cool drawings that his daughter has created, and he just looks so proud. He cheeses up and almost cries when he's talking about his daughter. Then there's a weird flash of him saying, by day I work in sales, by night that changes, and we suddenly see him in something like a Speedo. So it turns out that Anthony is a pro wrestler. It shows him bouncing around a wrestling ring, and he says it's silly, but it's also a passion for him. So I look forward to finding out more of it, whatever this is this season. Then there's a dramatic shot of him putting peanut butter on toast, and then he shares quite unrelated that he wants to start a family. So observation, the show is super posy. There are shots of Celine sitting in a field. Anthony's outside sipping another coffee. I'm getting the impression he really likes coffee, so do I. Experts share that they like his emotional maturity and that he's also very playful. The next couple for discussion is Tamara and Brent. They're described as two really driven and ambitious people who were matched due to having strong personalities, but also in the stage of their life that they're both ready for love. So evidently, Brent achieved a lot in the area of international event management, particularly in Dubai, although his professional life has more recently come crashing down. They show a ton of shots of him in poses in front of fancy cars and buildings, with people who potentially could be famous or models. He shares that he lost up to 6 figures and lost all of his businesses when the hospitality industry shut down due to COVID, and he had to come back to Australia. Because he'd been away for a few years, he described feeling like a stranger at his own home coming back to Sydney, and that everything about him withdrew, including his confidence. He'd been quite a confident guy before by the sounds of it, and especially when it came to women. So in response to all of this change, he turned into what he described as a hermit, and he hasn't gotten close to a female on an emotional level in a while. Brent is very into love as well. He says, without love, there's no point of us being on earth. And his dad's advice about this experiment and about life in general is to be honest and be respectful to everyone. He adds, especially to a woman, because they can cause the most pain and also the most happiness. We then meet Tamara, who's going to be his wife. She grew up in Ballarat, which she describes as a country town in Victoria. About 5 years ago, she moved to Queenstown. Apparently, she did not know anybody. So she found the first year quite hard and lonely and thought about going home. She works in a real estate IT company. She's very career-driven and loves being the boss. She's been doing her job for 4 years and says that while she's achieved her career goals, not so much in the relationship department, that they're all failures. Tamara says that she's not a good judge of character when it comes to dating and that she's never been in a healthy relationship. She's hesitant to give all of herself when she first meets people, and that, to me, going on Married at First Sight, you need to get to know someone pretty quickly, so we'll see how that plays out. Tamara shares that her parents split when she was 10 years old, and she still describes herself as being a little bit broken from that. She needed to look after her brother, who didn't understand what was happening. Tamara describes herself as having a wall up, and she prefers to be in control of things, but also shares that she's getting too old for that kind of behavior, and if she was to date on her own, she can't see that changing. I wonder how much this experiment is really going to change how she approaches relationships. Tamara said she wanted to do the experiment because she actually enjoys the psychology of it. So I wonder how much she's invested in it versus experiencing it and being able to kind of share a story afterwards. But she says that she's open to opening up a bit more, and she really wants to know what a healthy relationship feels like. Basically, Tamara says that she's got a long list of what she's interested in a partner and what she expects: someone who's ambitious, driven, and motivated, someone who's achieved something in life, because that's what she's done. She's very proud of what she's achieved career-wise. It's very clear, and she wants someone to match her. The experts describe Brent and Tamara as a sociable, attractive couple. They both have an outspoken communication style, and they feel like in a relationship together, they won't let issues simmer, and that even if they disagree, they'll throw things out on the table early and they'll know what the issues are. There won't be any confusion around that. They feel like if they can both apply the learnings from their careers that they've been able to embrace, if they can apply that to their relationship, they'll be on solid ground. The experts then talk about Celine and Anthony. Celine, again, she's 32. She's an executive assistant from New South Wales. Because of her lifestyle, she said she didn't have time to go on a date, but she's on the show, so she has time to get married to a stranger. Definitely a way to press fast forward and skip past the slow bits. She's nervous about how the new husband's going to behave towards her son and if he'll be a role model. Anthony is sad that his daughter can't be at the wedding, but there's a really cute moment where his daughter sends him a handwritten note wishing him luck and saying that she loves and misses him. There's a picture at the bottom of the note that has two people together inside of a heart. I'm not sure if that's meant to be her and him or him and Celine. Anthony tears up and puts the note in his pocket for the ceremony so that they're together. They also show Celine getting ready in her dress at this point. It's beaded and sheer. If I try and describe it, I won't do it justice. It'll sound like she's ready to go square dancing because I would say it has a fringe and tassels. That's not what it looks like at all. Her favourite auntie, there's a shot of her arriving as well and telling her that she looks beautiful. Celine shares that her auntie Gonza was at her birth and feels like a mother to her. She wants her reassurance and a motherly chat. And her aunt fills that void and tells her she's proud of her and to be true to herself and have an open heart and mind to this new experience. We flash forward to the wedding venue. It's taking place at the Sydney Polo Club, which is absolutely stunning. The in-laws introduce themselves, and it turns out that on both sides for the bride and groom, it's actually the aunties and uncles here as the family for this celebration. So keep in mind that the guest list for these weddings is super small due to COVID. So instead of the larger guest list we're used to, it's really just a couple of people per bride and groom. Celine says she feels like she's been single for 3 years, so it's like she's brand new to this and that she has some self-doubt. Anthony's planning to be a gentleman whose bride knows he's always there for her and he's willing to give absolutely everything to this relationship. He says that he's open, he's vulnerable, and willing to walk a tightrope without a safety net. This reminds me of the Ben and Mahogany Just Dance scene from 90 Day Fiancé, if you've been watching that. Celine's family has a huge smile on both of their faces when they see Anthony. He asks if everybody is nervous, and her family replies that they're more nervous for him. And amongst themselves, they put themselves in his shoes and wonder what he's thinking right now and what he's expecting in his bride. Celine pulls up in a white wedding limo, saying her heart's going to jump out of her chest. She doesn't know anything about her groom, and that's obviously starting to concern her. She says the man at the end of the aisle needs to be worth it, and she's hoping that when they lock eyes, all of her doubts and worries will just fall away. So no pressure there, Anthony. As she walks down the aisle, the camera sees her saying, "Oh God." I do believe that's before she saw Anthony. I think it was just general nerves. When he turns around for the big reveal, they smile. He looks truly happy. She looks happy. Clearly, she's got a lot of emotions running behind the smile, probably a lot of nerves there. I can't quite put my finger on it. Like she's happy, but also maybe concerned. She smiles and nods with encouragement. She mentions his kind eyes and does say she feels a spark. She tells him to his face that he's handsome, asks how tall he is, and they both agree that 6'3" is tall and that she's also tall with heels on. They laugh at his dad joke. They show that they're both parents and high five and talk about their children and their ages and their names, so immediately a connection there. Celine's first impression is that Anthony is nice and warm, he's good looking, he's a family man, and that they have a nice connection. The vows themselves are pretty straightforward. Anthony seems genuine. They're thoughtful vows. He sprinkles in a dad joke or two and mentions he's a wrestler. Everyone laughs, and she sounds a bit confused, but she also laughs and says, okay. His family comments that they look so good together. She mentions looking for a teammate and a partner in crime and also wanting an old school gentleman. So at this point, we're really seeing why the experts match them in terms of them looking for the same things and using some of the same buzzwords. There's eye contact during the ring ceremonies, and they fist bump, and there's laughter. They kiss on the mouth when the kiss happens. Celine says she can't believe that Anthony's her husband and that he's actually better than what she expected, that the way he speaks and carries himself makes her feel really comfortable, and that she has butterflies in her stomach. So overall, it seems like a really strong match. They seem to be looking for the same things and have similar values, and both seem really happy at this point in time. Who knows what this show will bring? We then move to Tamara and Brent. Tamara's getting ready, and she mentions to the camera that she's not interested in guys who slide into her DMs, and reads a message aloud where a guy sent her a pun about a Bruno Mars song and says, "I think I want Tamara you." She's not impressed. Her good friend Kelly has come to help her prepare, and Tamara describes Kelly as being much calmer and more of a gentle soul than she is. Tamara does say that she's excited, and Kelly shares that Tamara is very well controlled and doesn't tend to wear her feelings outside. Tamara shares that she doesn't want to push over Guy, and she's really after a strong personality. She's used to getting what she wants, and her list is pretty long. She mentions someone with a suit that's nicely ironed, no dirty fingernails, a fresh haircut, good looking, muscly, career goals, a passion of his own, can stand on his own 2 feet, a real man. She wants a lot of things, at least she can see that, and she's really fussy. She also jokes about wanting to make her own builder husband so she can get exactly the person that she wants. Her friend Kelly's concerned that if Tamara doesn't like his looks or career, she'd find it hard to get past that. Tamara shares that she doubts that her future husband will be disappointed in the way that she looks, and that she's putting a lot of effort into how she looks and hopes that he's taking the same amount of time and money to look good. Because after all, she's going to be standing next to him, and she wants him to look good next to her. We then swap to Brent. He's wearing a tie-dyed hoodie, very different from what she's wearing in the previous scene, and he's having a drink and looking out the window. He talks about how he's avoided anything close to dating. Flash forward, he's in a suit with his friend Levi helping him get ready. Levi then makes a random joke and says, what if Brent hops into bed and sees his wife's feet and they're disgusting? Brent freaks out. He mentions dirty and non-looked after feet. He shares that that's a phobia, way over and above something that he just doesn't like. He's uncomfortable around feet and worried now that he's going to obsess about his bride's feet. So thanks for that, Levi. He's going to forget her face and just look at her feet. We can see this is clearly going to be a bit of a plot point, hopefully not for the whole season, but we'll see. On the way to the wedding, Tamara shares with Kelly that she's not nervous. She's confident in the decisions that she makes, except for relationships. She points out that she tends to fall for immature little boys and has a tendency to take on the mother figure in those relationships. She's concerned about whether her husband will be good enough for her, and shares that it's hard for her not to be judgy, but she'll try. Brent shares in his car on the way to the ceremony that he's insecure about losing his businesses. He goes from that topic to start talking more about concerns that his wife might have disgusting feet. In an interesting turn of events, Tamara and Kelly are joking, probably producer-driven right here, that they hope that the husband likes giving foot rubs, hope that he has a foot scrubber and foot masks, and hope he doesn't have a foot phobia. I wonder if experts factored that into their decision-making or not. Either way, again, a bit of a plot point here. Brent says he's not looking for a particular look when it comes to his wife, but he hopes he's attracted to her and is praying she has nice feet. Tamara hopes he likes what he sees, but her biggest fear is that she won't like him and that they won't get along. So she feels like she was being honest with the experts when it came to what she wanted, and would be really disappointed if she doesn't get exactly what she asked for. She reinforces she wants someone who's handsome, again, career-driven, who has goals, and is past dating immature boys and needs a real man. At the ceremony, the big reveal for this couple, when Brent turns around, he looks really pleased with what he sees. Tamara looks a little judgy, but then she says she's happy and that he's really handsome and has a big smile on her face. She tells him that his suit looks good, and he says that she looks amazing. Brent says that his first thought was, wow, she's very beautiful, and he's happy with the woman he's about to marry. He compliments her eyes and says in the back of his head, don't look down and look at the feet, and you can start seeing him trying not to look down and failing terribly, to the point that Tamara asks him if he's okay. He was really worried because when he did look down, her dress was covering her feet, and he's worried he's in for a surprise later. He shares his vows, and interestingly, the word feet was said, I noticed, because that's kind of top of mind right now. But again, fairly genuine sounding vows with some mild jokes sprinkled in. After his vows, Tamara says maybe you've met your match, and he shares that his wife has spice and he likes it. By the way, I'm super distracted by the way throughout this ceremony, the officiant has this amazing purple suit. I am here for it. Can hardly look at the bride and groom because of this amazing purple suit. During the ceremony, as one does when they're marrying someone at first sight, she actually asks where he works. And Brent says that he's working at a new bar, restaurant, and club. Immediately, you can tell this relationship is doomed. Tamara looks super concerned and says, okay. Clearly, it's not okay. And it looks like she might actually faint. In response, Brent looks nervous and says they have a lot to catch up on. They'll get to the details. He muttered something about doing lots of things for the company. There's so much silence and awkwardness that Brent says, cool. And Tamara clears her throat. So things appear to be going downhill rapidly based on this career conversation. This cuts to her saying, why does he work in a nightclub, and that she doesn't want to date another party boy, that's not appealing, that she works for a big corporate company and is busy Monday to Friday and wants something who's achieved something in life like she has. Judgy much? She finishes reading cue cards for her vows like she's in a school speech competition. The groomsman is laughing because it's so ridiculous, and she finishes her vows by saying, thank you, again as if she's in a speech competition. The officiant says, you may kiss the bride, and he asks, wifey, can I kiss the bride? It was really cringy. She says, yes, you can have a little kiss, and they have a peck on the lips. Tamara's first reaction is, he doesn't appear to be what I've hoped for. Maybe he's not as much of a man as I did ask for. He seems like your average kind of guy, and average just isn't for me. I'm not average. I don't do average. So Tamara is also already judging the heck out of poor Brent. And it seems to have stemmed from when he shared what he did for work. During photos, it keeps showing her talking about how he works in a nightclub. She says she can't stop thinking about it, that she's judging his career, but that she judges everyone and forms an opinion, and that's just how she is. At some point, she just can't bear it anymore, and so she asks him about working in a nightclub. He explains that he doesn't, that he's a hospitality professional, and that he does a variety of things, including design, photography, and marketing. She seems to back off at that point and said, originally when I heard what you said, I thought the fact that you work in a nightclub isn't really great, and agrees that she sounded like a bitch, in her words. She also said that she had an image in her head and made it up, that she was purely judgmental and was completely wrong. So we see what seems to be a level of self-awareness and accepting that maybe she can be wrong sometimes. I don't know how much we're going to see of Tamara being this way throughout the season. During the actual photo shoot, Tamara and Brent actually seem to be having fun with each other. There's lots of laughter. They seem comfortable holding each other and having a kiss for the photos. Then the producers or the photographers specifically ask, this is clearly producer-driven, for a full Cinderella moment. Of course, this involves feet. They're asked to pose with Tamara's foot up on Brent's knee. Now, first of all, I find this gross. I think that shoes are pretty disgusting, and they want her to put her high-heeled shoe onto Brent's wedding pants, kind of gross either way. He's really nervous about where to put his hand. They want it on his shoe. He says he's freaking out, and she asks if he's okay, and he laughs awkwardly. So they ask him to hold the shoe. It's very producer-driven, again, back on the feet. The producer then meets with him separately and asks if she deserves a foot rub tonight after her long day, and he busts out laughing. They show him saying 110 plus 5%, I will not be rubbing my wife's feet. It's not happening, not now, not ever. The MC of the overall show at that point in the scene change makes a joke about getting off on the wrong foot. And during the photo shoot, he says, how fun, as he's holding her foot in his lap. Tamara shares that while she judged Brent quickly, he'll quickly learn that that's who she is. And Brent describes the photo shoot as a horror movie. Levi then asks the couple as they sit down for dinner what they think of each other, and Tamara admits that she prejudged Brent. She said she was hungry and couldn't think straight, and that's why she judged him, and that she's trying to work on being a judger. Brent asks randomly what she'd think if he worked at a toy store, and she said if he did, that he wouldn't be a very ambitious person, which is what she asked for from the experts. She talks about those kind of industries not being bad and says, but if your goal is to stay in a retail job for the rest of your life and not progress, that's fine. Good on the person that wants to do that, but that's just not me. If that's you and your goal for where I'm going, it doesn't meet my lifestyle, we wouldn't get along. Working in a toy store, it doesn't align and would pull me back. So Brent and Levi are horrified by the way she's talking down and judging people who work in certain occupations, and they tell her that that's superficial and ask if that's a step down for her. Tamara immediately says no, that she's just stressed and busy all the time, and that someone like that wouldn't understand that she's stressed and busy all the time. Levi says that he handed her the shovel and feels bad about doing that because she does keep digging. She describes once dating a guy who worked in a retail shop and shares how she was embarrassed to introduce him to people because it didn't compliment who she is. She doubles down on not being apologetic, not wanting to date someone in a role like that. Then she makes a joke about if she had a list of requirements in a partner, it would be a novel-sized list. I'm picturing a giant CVS receipt plus some. Brent says to the camera, not to her, that she's spoiled, pretentious, entitled, and has a snobbish way of looking at things, that it looks like it's going to be a clash of heads and that they're in for a bit of a rocky road. So if anything, I think we can guarantee that there are going to be fireworks. I don't think Tamara is going to be exceptionally liked coming out of this episode. Don't have great hopes for this couple at this point, but it could be entertaining to watch. Now we get to see more of Celine and Anthony, and they seem to be in a much better place than Brent and Tamara. So Celine describes Anthony as a sexy man who's tall, dark, and handsome. She says he seems charming and that he cares about her and that makes her feel good. During the photography session, they kiss, and he says that as far as the first kiss goes, it was something in a good way. He also describes them having chemistry and a spark. So the spark is mutual. Celine's aunt Gonza and her partner Joseph say that they like the groom, that he's old school and a gentleman. He's very caring, and we see him pulling out the chair for her. He tells her to let him know if she needs anything. He says this very quietly in her ear and says he'll snap his fingers and get anything done. The family says that they have great chemistry, and if they can get the personality connection right, they could have a great future. There is a light discussion about how he's a wrestler, but then they get into a longer conversation about their kids. They both describe finding each other as calming and kind and gentle and seem to have a really positive view of each other. So this relationship's off to a really nice start. We then move back to Brent and Tamara, not going so well, and they are eating, or at least Brent is trying to. Tamara corrects his table manners, advising him in front of everybody at the table that he should be using his cutlery from the outside. He's apparently picked the wrong fork. He's also using his fork in his left hand. He says no, he refuses to change and starts waving his fork around. Tamara complains that his right hand was just stabbing at his food. It was just a bit cavemanish, and that's not okay. And then she starts showing him, as if he's a child, how to use the fork correctly. Tamara advises that she's going to pick up on everything he does incorrectly and that he's going to be a better person for it. Brent shares that while he likes a girl who takes charge and doesn't mind being told what to do sometimes, he doesn't want to be told how to use a fork. Tamara shares that she's not often wrong and that her way has to be the right way. Brent, once again, kind of reads Tamara. He says she's one-sided and narrow-minded in her way of thinking, and that he doesn't tend to get along with people like that, and neither does Levi. I'm not sure why he mentioned the Levi part. She's not marrying Levi, but there we are. Speaking of whom, at this point, he's a little frustrated by the fork situation, and he gets up to take a break to chat with Levi. He asks Levi what he thinks of the relationship at this early stage, and Levi shares that he thinks that Tamara is going to challenge Brent and that it's going to be a big learning curve for both of them. They're both clearly upset about the toy store and the fork analogies and situations. While the boys are out discussing stuff, Kelly tells Tamara that she thinks that Brent's a bit short and that he's a short man. And Tamara thinks that he'd struggle to date anyone. So far the producers have seemingly played up Kelly being kind. Even at one point she started to stop Tamara from saying something awful. But now we see her being quite cruel about Brent's appearance and kind of fueling Tamara further. By this point, Brent is a little bit riled up and he says, to the camera, don't tell me which effing hand to use to eat dinner or which fork to use. They flash back to Tamara and Alex. Tamara's playing with her wedding band and says that she's shocked it's real gold and she thought it would be one of those rings that makes your finger green. She says that Brent's going to learn very quickly that Tamara always wears the pants in a relationship. Brent then kind of turns a corner and says, play this game and I'll see who wins, and decides to be a gentleman, but announces to the camera that he's going to have fun with this, and it's on like Donkey Kong. Back to Celine and Anthony. Celine describes Anthony as a perfect match and shows how he's an old school gentleman. and that it's time for her to take the lead and show him some of the Turkish culture. So she hops up and says she'll be back. Flash forward, and she comes out dancing in her Turkish belly dancing attire and does a dance for him and gets him to dance along as well. He said he thought it was really cool to experience her culture, which she's mentioned to him in passing, and everyone else is invited up to a dance as well. There's lots of laughter and seems like a fun experience for the group. Anthony described Celine as having a beautiful energy about her and being a beautiful soul, and Celine says, he's everything that I hoped for. So two very contrasting couples. I'm sure they've been put in this order for a reason, just being skeptical around production, but I guess we'll see what happens here. Now, if we thought that the fork situation and the toy store situation were not enough, we are now about to watch Brent invite Tamara to cut the cake. Brent says that he doesn't want to say he doesn't like Tamara, but that he's working out his bride instead, and that she has tendencies he doesn't like, but he's going to be the better man and let it play out. Tamara says to the camera that she was pleased she was matched with Brent and can understand why they've been matched. So we're seeing two very different sides of Tamara. It's almost like she says mean things when she doesn't think the camera or production are watching, even though she knows she's being filmed. And then when she's doing these interviews with the camera, she's very, very kind in what she says about Brent, at least for now. They cut the cake together. He's showing her how to do it, and she ends up apparently cutting with a knife upside down. At first they're laughing. It's a little bit like a slapstick comedy routine, and he's checking his watch, and they're bickering and bantering. It's one of those bantering, bickering times where it's hard to tell if it's actually fun or not. Tamara then says that Brent handed her the knife the wrong way. Brent says it's speculation. The friends are laughing at them. But then Tamara gets really obsessed with Brent saying that he's sorry and admitting to passing her the knife the wrong way. And she says she wants him to understand that she wears the pants once again, and to say sorry, he's wrong. And he says he wants her to learn to let things go. So Tamara draws a really long bow at this point and says that she's really worried that Brent won't be able to say sorry for other things if he can't say sorry for handing her a knife upside down. So now we've had Toy Story Gate, Fork Gate, and now Knife Gate. It sounds like this is going to be a dramatic relationship, again, full of fireworks. There's meant to be a first dance. I don't know why they just don't give up at this point, but for some reason, Tamara's willing to dance with Brent. She's demanding an apology the whole time for the knife situation. He's refusing to apologize. She's still demanding it. We flash to Brent, who says, I think tonight's going really well, and by well, I mean my wife's a psychopath. So always a good way to start a marriage. Transparently, I would be concerned too if I was Brent. I'm not sure if psychopath is necessarily the right word there, but her behavior was somewhat unusual and not in a fun, quirky, endearing type of way. Brent talks about drama and how this is feeling like the bold and the beautiful. He then adds, I like her. She's kind of funny. She's a bit of a dick. They talk about being playful and enjoying it. Tamara says she hopes she's feeling a connection, that he's a cool guy and they have fun, but he probably thinks she's kind of crazy. So it sounds like they're on the same page. There does seem to be some element of flirting in their relationship. Brent also mentions that. He shows that she does have traits that he likes, that she's beautiful and very strong-willed, and he likes that. The scene is almost sweet. It's so confusing to watch. Brent's thinking that Tamara might bring drama and that it's going to be work, but he's still up for the challenge. And then he starts talking about feet again. So I can't figure this couple out. They're fighting, they're not fighting. She's saying awful things. He's forgiving her and saying he liked some of the behavior. It's unclear what's going to happen with this couple. I do not have high hopes. Finally, we get a sneak peek of next episode 2 of season 9, and we see that Domenica is going to talk about her divorce at her wedding and that she's really concerned about breaking this news to the groom and his family. And the experts are sitting down with Mitch, and he's described as the most skeptical groom in the history of the show. To finish off, how helpful are we for these couples? Based on this episode, I personally rate Celine and Anthony as a 9 out of 10. I know how these shows work, so I'm sure my dreams will be crushed. There's a high likelihood there will be a plot twist, but at this point in time, their values match. They both feel a spark and their families get along really, really well. So they're set up for success. It will be up to them, and as her family said, the personality connection. On the other hand, I rate Tamara and Brent a 2. Tamara has already showed that she seems to be an awful human being. She's been awful about his career, disparaging about his height, hinting that he's cheap and all sorts of other mean things. So it's going to be a challenging situation. Again, probably very entertaining to watch. The only reason I didn't give a lower score is there seems to be a certain amount of chemistry and they're bickering and bantering back and forth. And at least in the one-on-ones with the cameras, they're saying nice-ish things about each other. All right. It's been so much fun recapping this episode. Thank you for joining me. Again, MAFS Australia is one of my favourites and I'm excited to share it with you. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. I look forward to watching and recapping the rest of the weddings with you very soon. Feel free to drop me a note on our Anchor, Instagram or Facebook and I will talk to you again soon.